Okay, imagine this for a second. You've got simultaneous chaos breaking out. A political campaign gets hacked over here,
Yeah.
while a major nation's banking system and power grid flicker offline over there.
Right.
And at the same time, dozens of huge oil tankers just go digitally dark, disabled out at sea. Sounds like a thriller plot, doesn't it?
It really does. But, what you just laid out, that's not fiction. That's pretty much the operational reality of Iran's approach, what they call hybrid warfare.
Exactly.
It's where the lines between soldiers on the ground, proxy forces, and really cutting-edge cyber stuff, they've just completely blurred.
And that's what we're diving into today. Our listeners sent over a fascinating stack of sources, threat intel reports, some deep academic work on censorship, even military quick reference guides.
A real mix.
Yeah, a great mix, all giving us this unfiltered look at Iran's strategy. It's complex, multi-domain. So our mission really is to unpack how this whole thing works, especially this network they call the Iranian Threat Network, or ITN.
And crucially, how their growing cyber power is reshaping this whole asymmetric conflict game.
Before we get into the weeds, though, we need to grasp Iran's basic military setup, right?
Absolutely. You got to understand the structure first. It's this dual system. You have the Artesh, that's the conventional military, the regular Army, Navy, Air Force.
Okay.
But then you have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. And frankly, they're vastly more influential, ideologically driven.
So not your typical military structure.
Not at all. And they know, strategically, they can't win a straight-up conventional fight against, say, the U.S. or other major powers. Their whole doctrine pivots on asymmetric warfare.
Meaning
They focus on tools that give them the most bang for their buck, basically.
Yeah.
Low cost, high impact. Things like proxies, those militias we hear about. Mass-produced missiles, and this is key for today, really sophisticated cyber operations.
So these tools let them punch above their weight, project power without a huge conventional footprint. Exactly.
Yeah.
Regionally, globally. Always operating just under that threshold of triggering a full-blown conventional war. It's a constant pressure.
Right. And as we get ready to explore these methods, we're talking about everything from how they manage proxies in Iraq to, using MFA push bombing against hospitals in the U.S.
Yeah, the specifics are pretty wild.
It's just crucial for anyone listening, especially in organizations, to realize this isn't theoretical. This threat matrix is active now. So if you're out there struggling, trying to keep up with all the mandatory security standards, the compliance you need to defend against state-level stuff.
Which is incredibly complex.
Totally. You need resources you can actually use. We really recommend starting with www.compliancehub.wiki. It's focused, accessible for that regulatory guidance.
Good starting point.
And for staying on top of the actual breaches happening, the vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure we're about to discuss, you need real-time intel. Make sure www.breach.company is part of your daily routine. Yeah, that kind of preparation, it's just not optional anymore. The scale here,
Wow.
it means we really have to start at the top. We need to understand the architects, right? The IRGC and this whole Iranian threat network, ITN concept.
Okay, let's unpack the ITN. So it's not like one big army reporting to Tehran.
No, not really. Think of it more as a complex web.
Yeah.
It spans the globe, tens of thousands of militants, allies, partners, full-blown proxies. Iran arms them, trains them, influences them.
And this is their main way to, deter attacks and spread their influence?
Precisely. It's how they project power and their revolutionary ideology way beyond their own borders.
And who's pulling the strings? Who's managing this whole web?
That would be the IRGC Quads Force, the IRGC-QF. They're the operational core, no question. It's like the IRGC's Special Operations Branch, but semi-autonomous.
Semi-autonomous?
Yeah, they have a lot of leeway. Their specific mission is exporting the Islamic Revolution. So Quads Force commanders manage the ITN, operate globally with significant autonomy.
Wow.
And they report directly to the top, to the supreme leader. Their reach is incredible, touches every U.S. combatant command's area of responsibility.
That's huge. Now, the sources mention a specific method they prefer for projecting power, the cadre approach. What's that about? It sounds different from just, sending cash or weapons.
Oh, it's way more sophisticated than that. It's not just transactional. Iran embeds its own people officers, experienced NCOs, the cadre, right down in the tactical level with their proxy units.
So like in Iraq, Syria, Yemen.
Exactly. Wherever they have key proxy forces operating.
What makes that approach so effective?
It's kind of genius, really.
Yeah.
It gives Tehran tight control and accountability without needing this massive, obvious Iranian troop deployment.
Yeah.
The cadre isn't just observing, they're providing the whole spectrum.
Like what?
Training on advanced systems, complex logistics support, direct tactical advice, sometimes even direct leadership during critical operations.
So it keeps a low profile, but ensures things go according to plan.
Precisely. And it lets them tailor the support for different groups in different places, keeping everyone synchronized. Plus, and this is crucial, it maintains that layer of plausible deniability.
Ah, right. If something goes wrong.
Iran can always say, oh, that was the proxy group acting on their own, even if there was an Iranian officer right there calling the shots.
Okay, so that's the method. What about the proxies themselves? Some must be more important than others. The sources definitely highlighted Lebanese Hezbollah, LH.
Yeah, Hezbollah is, without a doubt, the crown jewel of the ITN, the most influential, most capable proxy. The sources are blunt. Hezbollah will follow any directive from Iran's supreme leader, period.
And they're big, right?
Huge. The numbers are a bit dated, 2017, but even then, estimates were around 45,000 fighters, 21,000 full-time, 24,000 reserves. That's a serious conventional force, let alone an asymmetric one.
But it's not just about fighters, is it?
Not at all. Their power goes way beyond military muscle. Hezbollah runs this massive global covert network dedicated to illicit facilitation.
Meaning criminal activity.
Pretty much. Smuggling drugs, weapons, goods, sophisticated money laundering schemes, counterfeiting passports, large-scale fraud, you name it.
And Iran uses this network too.
Absolutely. Iran's wider ITN leverages Hezbollah's existing illicit infrastructure constantly. It's used to fund operations, enable travel for operatives, move sensitive materials across continents, North America, South America, Africa, Europe. Hezbollah effectively acts as a global financial and logistical arm for the entire network.
Wow. Okay, let's shift over to Iraq. The situation there seems different, more fragmented with these Iraqi Shia militias, SMGs.
Yeah, Iran's strategy in Iraq is interesting. They seem to deliberately support multiple groups, sometimes competing ones. It keeps everyone dependent on Tehran for support and influence, ensures no single group gets too powerful independently.
Smart, in a way. Which groups are most important there?
Well, the sources point to three key players. First, you've got the Badr organization. They're the old guard, the most established Iranian proxy in Iraq, politically very powerful, often compared to Hezbollah in terms of their influence within Iraq.
And what makes Badr so critical?
Their deep infiltration into the Iraqi state, specifically the Ministry of Interior, MOI. This gives them incredible leverage over Iraqi police, intelligence, internal security forces. It's state capture, almost.
That level of infiltration has serious strategic implications, doesn't it? I remember reading that the Badr leader, Hadi al-Ameri, was Minister of Transportation at one point.
Exactly. And that position allowed the ITN basically unfettered, state-sanctioned access to Iraqi airspace. Think about that. Moving weapons, personnel, supplies between Iran and Syria, all facilitated through official Iraqi channels.
That's blurring the lines between hybrid war and hybrid governance.
It really is. Okay, second key group, Kataib Hezbollah, KH. Not related to Lebanese Hezbollah directly, but ideologically aligned and heavily supported by Iran.
What's their deal?
They're smaller than Badr, much more secretive, but known for being highly capable and ruthless. They've been linked to some pretty audacious stuff, like that kidnapping of Qatari royals back in 2015.
And during the U.S. presence.
During Operation Iraqi Freedom, KH maintained a smaller footprint but were incredibly effective. They specialized in complex attacks, sophisticated IEDs, sniper operations, precise rocket strikes against coalition bases. Elite, disciplined, dangerous.
Okay. And the third one?
Asaib al-Haq, AAH, often described as one of the most lethal Shia militias. Their track record during OIS is just staggering. They claimed responsibility for something like over 6,000 attacks against U.S. and coalition forces.
6,000.
That's the claim. And their leader, Qais al-Khazali, was actually detained by the U.S. back in 2007 for directing the kidnapping and murder of 5 American soldiers. Shows you the level they operated at.
So these groups, Badr, KH, AAH, they were forged in that asymmetric fight using Iranian support and weapons?
Absolutely, and now they're trying to translate that battlefield power into political legitimacy within Iraq, often under the umbrella of the Popular Mobilization Forces, the PMF. But their core capabilities came from that conflict, using signature Iranian tech.
Let's talk about that tech. The sources really emphasize one particular weapon from that OIF era. The explosively formed penetrator, the EFP. What made it so significant?
The EFP is just a perfect example of Iran's asymmetric mindset applied to weapons development. It's basically a low-tech concept to defeat high-tech armor, but the actual production requires significant precision.
How does it work, basically?
Okay, Picture a specially shaped explosive charge packed behind a concave metal plate, usually copper. When the charge detonates, the force reshapes that copper plate into a high-velocity, molten slug.
Molten copper flying at high speed.
Exactly. Phenomenal velocity. And that slug can punch through incredibly thick steel armor. Even the advanced reactive armor used on things like Abrams tanks or Bradley fighting vehicles wasn't always proof against EFPs.
So it leveled the playing field against heavily armored vehicles.
It did. And critically, EFPs aren't easy to just whip up in a garage. They require precision machining specific materials. This meant Iran could control their distribution carefully through the Quds force cadre and their proxy networks. It gave them accountability.
And they were devastatingly effective in Iraq.
Absolutely. One of the most lethal and strategically significant threats U.S. and coalition forces faced. A clear signature of Iranian involvement.
Okay, so we've got the organizational control through the Quds cadre, the funding via illicit networks like Hezbollah's, and these signature asymmetric weapons like the EFP. That leads us pretty naturally to the other major pillar of Iran's hybrid strategy, the cyber domain.
Right. And here, the tech is anything but low tech, and the targets are truly global.
So Iran sees cyber warfare as what, another asymmetric tool.
Definitely. It's seen as low cost, high reward, especially potent when you're under heavy economic sanctions. It serves two really critical parallel purposes for them.
Which are?
First, defense against foreign cyber attacks. They haven't forgotten Stuxnet, believe me. That was a huge shock to their system.
Right, the attack on their nuclear program.
Exactly. And second, internal stability. Using cyber tools to monitor and suppress domestic dissent, control information flow. The Supreme Cyber Council, set up way back in 2012, dictates the overall strategy. But day-to-day tactical operations, that's mostly the IRGC.
And their offensive skills, where do they rank globally?
They're consistently ranked in the top tier, usually top 4, alongside Russia, China, North Korea. And that's because they've demonstrated the capability and the willingness to cause real-world destructive impact. Not just espionage, but damage.
The big example everyone points to is Shamoon, right, against Saudi Aramco.
Yeah, Shamoon in 2012 is the classic case study. It wasn't subtle. It was pure data destruction malware. Wiped something like 35,000 computers at Aramco.
35,000, that must have crippled them.
It did. Reportedly shut down their internal operations for weeks. Showed Tehran was willing to cross a line into digital industrial sabotage. And they didn't stop there. Similar destructive wiper attacks hit Saudi government networks again in 2016-2018.
Beyond just destruction, though, they're also big on cyber espionage and influence ops.
Oh, absolutely. Experts in it. We saw APT-42 that's just a designation for a specific Iranian threat group, active as recently as 2024. What were they doing?
Targeting election campaigns.
Yeah, using sophisticated social engineering, spear phishing emails specifically aimed at campaign officials involved in the U.S. presidential election. A clear attempt at foreign interference, gathering intelligence, maybe shaping perceptions.
And then there was that massive academic data theft.
Right, the Mabna Institute indictment. That was breathtaking in scale. Iranian hackers linked to this institute stole over 31 terabytes of data.
Terabytes. Of what kind of data?
Sensitive academic research, scientific papers, intellectual property, stolen from hundreds of universities worldwide. They essentially vacuumed up decades of research.
What's the point of stealing academic papers?
It directly fuels Iran's own scientific and technological development programs. They bypass potentially billions in R&D costs by just stealing the results from others. It helps them leapfrog development cycles, especially under sanctions.
Okay, that's espionage on an industrial scale. But what about the tactics they're using right now, particularly against critical infrastructure? The sources mention some really aggressive cyber tactics since late 2023.
Yeah, this is where it gets really concerning because they're targeting essential services, healthcare, energy, government networks. And they're exploiting the human element very effectively.
How so?
They also start with brute force password spraying. Just trying common passwords against lots of accounts to find ones that work. Basic stuff, but effective at scale.
Find a working username and password. Then what?
Then they hit you with MFA push bombing, leveraging multi-factor authentication fatigue.
Wait, MFA fatigue. Push bombing. Walk us through that. MFA is supposed to be secure, right?
It is, if implemented and used correctly. But push bombing exploits human psychology. Once the attacker have your password, they trigger the MFA push notification to your phone or authenticator app. Again and again and again.
Just flooding you with requests.
Exactly. Maybe late at night, maybe when you're busy, you get notification after notification. It's annoying, confusing.
Yeah.
Just want it to stop.
So out of frustration, you just hit approve.
And go. Or maybe you think, did I accidentally trigger this? And hit approve. Either way, the attacker is in. Full, validated access to your account, and often the network. It's a simple, low-tech way to bypass a high-tech control by targeting the person.
That's brilliant and terrifying. Exploiting user
It
annoyance.
really is. And once they're in using that method, they don't just sit there. They're very adept at exploiting known weaknesses inside the network.
Using specific tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs.
Right. The intelligence reports detail these. For example, if the MFA setup is weak, they might register their own device as a new MFA option. That gives them persistent access even if you change your password.
Sneaky.
Very. Then they move laterally spreading through the network, often using standard legitimate tools like Remote Desktop Protocol, RDP, or PowerShell,
Why use standard tools?
because it makes their activity harder to spot. It blends in with normal administrative traffic. They're not always using unique malware that screams hacker. They also exploit known critical vulnerabilities, like that Microsoft NetLogon flaw, CVE 2020-1472.
What does that one let them do?
That one's nasty. It can allow an attacker to gain administrative control over the entire network domain controllers. Basically, game over. They own the kingdom.
Okay, when you lay it out like that password spray, MSA bombing, lateral movement with RDP, exploiting known CVEs, it really shows that just having MFA isn't a magic bullet.
Not at all. It needs to be phishing-resistant MFA. It needs strong policies, constant monitoring for weird login patterns or lateral movement.
Which brings us back to resources. For organizations really trying to figure out, okay, how do we actually defend against this stuff? How do we meet the standards needed? That's exactly where something like www.compliancehub.wiki comes in. Getting that guidance on access control, logging, MFA implementation, it's critical.
Absolutely critical. You need to assume credentials will be compromised eventually. Defense means limiting the blast radius, detecting that lateral movement fast, and knowing what new TTPs the attackers are using today is vital.
Which is where continuous threat intelligence comes in. Keeping tabs on www.reach.company gives you that real-time view of the kinds of attacks happening, the vulnerabilities being exploited right now.
You just have to stay current. The attackers certainly are.
But here's the flip side the sources highlight. Despite all this offensive cyber power, Iran itself is quite internally vulnerable. There's been a lot of digital retaliation hitting them back.
Oh, definitely. The blowback has been significant and often targeted where it hurts most. Their own critical infrastructure. We've seen reports, sometimes claims from hacktivist groups, of major disruptions.
Like what kind of disruptions?
Things causing real chaos, like widespread outages of the country's ATM networks. Imagine people suddenly unable to get cash.
Yeah.
That causes immediate public anger and instability.
Yeah, that hits everyone.
And large-scale, unexpected power outages in major cities. Again, hitting daily life, industry. It shows that Iran's own reliance on centralized digital systems for control is also a major vulnerability, an Achilles heel.
And this isn't entirely new, is it? There's a history here.
No, the precedent is powerful. You have to go back to 2010 and Stuxnet. That worm, widely thought to be a U.S.-Israeli operation, wasn't just espionage. It was the first publicly known cyber weapon to cause actual physical damage.
By messing with the centrifuges at the Natanz nuclear facility.
Exactly. Sabotaging them by manipulating their controllers. That was a watershed moment. Then came DQ in 2011, which seemed to be more about reconnaissance, gathering intelligence for future attacks like Stuxnet.
So Iran is fighting these external cyber battles, dealing with retaliation. But they're also waging a war internally, a domestic digital siege.
Very much so. The regime sees uncontrolled internet access, social media, secure messaging apps. They see these as existential threats, tools for organizing protests, spreading dissent. Internal stability is paramount.
And their censorship efforts are getting more advanced.
Frighteningly so. Recent academic studies have confirmed something pretty significant. Systems Iran uses, likely based on or inspired by China's Great Firewall tech, can now actively detect and block even highly sophisticated, fully encrypted anti-censorship protocols.
Wait, even things like ShadowSox, Tor with Ops4, VMS, those are designed specifically to hide.
Exactly, they can block them in real time. It's a major leap. Previously, censors often relied on just blocking known IP addresses of VPN servers or proxies.
So how are they doing it now, if the traffic is encrypted?
They're using advanced deep packet inspection, but not to read the content. They're using algorithms to identify the unique fingerprint or signature of the encrypted connection itself. Each protocol has a subtle way it establishes a connection, even when encrypted.
They can recognize the handshake, basically.
That's a good way to put it. They spot the signature of, say, a VS connection starting up,
Yeah.
even though they can't read what's inside it.
And if they spot that signature?
Boom. The system applies what the researchers called a denial state to that specific traffic flow. If it doesn't look like standard, known, filterable traffic like regular HTTPS web browsing, which they usually allow through after inspection, it gets instantly blocked.
Crude but effective, sounds like.
Very effective, and apparently quite precise. The studies noted it only blocked about 0.6% of normal internet traffic as collateral damage. So they're getting good at surgically removing the evasion tools without breaking the entire internet for everyone.
And the ultimate goal here is?
To push the population towards their National Information Network, NIN. Essentially a state-controlled, heavily censored Iranian intranet. The dream for the regime is to eventually replace access to the global internet with this walled garden, giving them total surveillance and control.
Wow. Okay, the scope here is just immense. From the Quds Force cadre managing militias armed with EFPs to IRGC hackers using MFA fatigue to breach hospitals, and then this real-time blocking of encrypted protocols internally.
It's truly hybrid.
But perhaps nowhere do we see the physical economy and the digital conflict merge more clearly than out on the water. The maritime front.
Ah, yes. Part 3. The digital siege at sea. You absolutely cannot understand Iran's strategy without understanding the importance of its maritime operations, particularly the Shadow Fleet. This isn't just about ships, it's about economic survival.
Lay out those economic stakes. How important is this fleet?
Existential is probably the right word. Under crippling international sanctions, particularly on oil exports, this Shadow Fleet is the primary way Iran gets its oil to market and generates revenue.
How much revenue are we talking?
Estimates vary, but some sources suggest it could be generating upwards of $70 billion annually in oil money. That cash is what funds everything else we've been talking about.
Everything.
Pretty much. The ballistic missile program, nuclear ambitions, and crucially, the financial pipeline to Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Iraqi militias. The entire ITN runs on this oil money.
So getting around sanctions isn't just a side hustle, it's a core strategic imperative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the sanctions evasion tactics are incredibly sophisticated. Vessels constantly play identity games.
Like how?
Changing names frequently, switching flags, flying flags at convenience from places like Panama, Barbados, Palau, countries with lax registration. Ownership is hidden behind layers of shell companies. It makes tracking who actually owns or operates a vessel incredibly difficult.
And digitally.
Digitally, the key tactic is manipulating their automatic identification system, AIS transponders. These are required systems that broadcast a ship's identity, position, course, and speed.
To prevent collisions, right?
Primarily, yes. But Shadow Fleet vessels routinely turn their AIS off. They go dark, especially when they're near Iranian oil terminals like Karg Island, or when meeting other ships for illicit ship-to-ship transfers. This creates huge blind spots in global maritime tracking systems.
Okay, so it's a sophisticated operation, hiding in plain sight, but even this has a weakness, an Achilles heel. The sources mention VSAT vulnerability.
Right. VSAT stands for Very Small Aperture Terminal. These are the satellite communication systems that provide the main data link between a ship at sea and shore HQs, internet access, etc.
The ship's internet connection, basically.
Essentially, yes. And the fundamental issue is that most of these systems were designed and installed years, even decades ago. Back then, the focus was all on operational reliability, getting a signal, cybersecurity. It was barely an afterthought.
So the vulnerabilities are built in.
Systemic and widespread, we're talking basic stuff.
Yeah.
Ships still using the default passwords and configuration settings that the VSAT unit shipped with.
Seriously, default passwords on critical comms?
It happens all the time. Ships often don't have dedicated IT security staff. Crews are focused on sailing, not patching satellite firmware. And worse, the management interfaces for these VS systems are often just exposed directly to the public internet.
Meaning anyone can find them?
If you know where to look, yes, using tools like Shodan.
Okay, pause there. Shoda, explain that for us. Is it like Google?
Sort of. But instead of searching for websites, Shodan constantly scans the internet looking for connected devices. Things like webcams, industrial control systems, routers, servers, and yes, maritime VS alerts terminals.
So if a ship's VS management portal is online with a default password?
Shodan will likely find it, index it, and make it discoverable to anyone searching. Combine that with terrible patch management, ships might go months or years without updating firmware, leaving known vulnerabilities wide open, and you have a recipe for disaster.
An open door for attackers. And this vulnerability wasn't just theoretical, was it? There was a major attack campaign exploiting this recently, led by a group called Labduktigan.
That's right. Labduktigan translates to sewn lips. They're an interesting group, an anti-Iranian government hacktivist collective.
Hacktivists, but with serious skills.
Oh, yeah. They first made a big splash back in 2019. They didn't just hack something. They leaked a huge trove of internal documents and tools belonging to one of Iran's main cyber espionage groups, APT-34, also known as Oil Rig.
They doxed Iran's own hackers.
Pretty much. It suggested they had incredible technical skills and potentially insider access or sources, maybe disgruntled people within Iran's own cyber apparatus.
And they turned these skills onto the maritime sector.
They did, with remarkable scale and precision. There was a big operation in March 2025, hitting around 116 ships. Then another focused attack in August 2025, targeting 64 vessels, mostly tankers and cargo ships linked to Iran.
How did they hit so many ships at once? Were they hacking each ship individually?
No, that's the crucial part. They found a much more efficient target. They compromised Fanava Group.
Who are they?
Fanava is, or was, Iran's primary domestic satellite communications provider. The single point of failure for a huge chunk of Iranian maritime communications, including many of those shadow fleet vessels.
Just supply chain attack.
Textbook. By getting inside Fanava, Labduktigan gained access potentially to the communications of all the ships using their service. They didn't need to hack 100 ships, they just needed to hack one provider.
That kind of central compromise. The cascade effect must be huge. What are the immediate risks when the comms hub is breached or controlled?
It goes way beyond just eavesdropping, though that's bad enough, losing sensitive operational or commercial data. The real danger is manipulation.
Manipulation of what?
And navigation data. An attacker inside the ViaSat system could potentially spoof GPS signals, all to the data fed to the ship's electronic chart display, ACDIS. Imagine sending a tanker off course towards rocks or into another ship's path.
Catastrophic.
Absolutely. They could also interfere with the AI tracking we talked about, making ships invisible or appear somewhere. They're not massive collision risks. And they could potentially disrupt or disable safety-critical GMDSS emergency communication systems. It turns from cyber attack to potential physical disaster very quickly.
So the Labduktigan attacks on Fanava weren't just embarrassing for Iran. They were a massive wake-up call about the physical risks of cyber vulnerability in the maritime world.
Exactly. It showed how hacktivists, or potentially state adversaries, could achieve major strategic disruption by targeting the fragile digital infrastructure that underpins a nation's economic lifeline, especially a sanctioned one, relying on shadow operations.
It forces everyone, not just Iran, to look hard at the legacy cybersecurity problems in maritime OT operational technology. Those VSATs, the navigation systems, they're critical infrastructure, too.
When your entire economy hinges on that shadow fleet operating safely and secretly, you suddenly realize cyber risk isn't abstract anymore. It's dollars and cents, and potentially lives.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together now. We've seen the proxies, the missiles, the sophisticated cyber ops, the vulnerable maritime economy. How does this all converge in an actual conflict? Let's look at part 4, hybrid tactics and global reach.
The Israel-Iran escalation in 2025 that the sources mentioned is a perfect recent example of this convergence in action. That wasn't just missiles and drones. It was a fight across every domain at once.
A true cyber hybrid war. What did that look like on the ground or, well, in the ether?
You had Israel launching these high-impact cyber strikes, hitting Iranian financial institutions. There was a group calling itself Konjeska Durande, Predatory Sparrow, widely assumed to be an Israeli front, claiming they hit Iran's state-owned bank SIPA, allegedly wiping data.
Following earlier attacks attributed to Israel that hit things like steel plants, railways, targeting the industrial base digitally.
Right, showing a willingness to inflict economic and industrial pain through cyber means. Meanwhile, Iran countered heavily with disinformation campaigns, psychological operations online, trying to sow panic and distrust within Israel.
But the hybrid part got really physical too, didn't it? With intelligence gathering.
Yeah, this was fascinating. Reports confirmed Iran was actively tapping into private security cameras across Israel.
Just regular CCTV cameras,
Yeah.
like shops and homes.
Exactly. Simple internet-connected cameras, often poorly secured. They were apparently using access to these streams to gather real-time intelligence. Watching street activity, maybe tracking movements near sensitive sites, potentially for war planning or targeting.
That's incredible. Using insecure IoT devices as battlefield sensors. Low-cost, high-yield intel.
Definitely. And the conflict also unleashed this massive hacktivist swarm. Suddenly you had over 60 different pro-Iran hacktivist groups popping up.
60 groups. Where did they come from?
Seemingly coordinated, but originating from across the Middle East, Asia, launching constant DDoS attacks, website defacements against Israeli targets, dozens per day. Groups like Dynet were even making direct threats against the U.S., warning them not to intervene.
So a kind of crowdsourced cyber militia jumping into the fray?
Yeah, showing how quickly geopolitical events can trigger widespread, semi-coordinated cyber actions from non-state actors, likely encouraged or enabled by state sponsors.
Okay, that's the regional conflict dynamic. But the sources stress the truly global ITN footprint. This network isn't just Middle East focused, it's everywhere, operating in that gray zone.
Right, active in every U.S. combatant command's area of responsibility, AOR. Let's take AFRICOM, for example. How does Iran operate there?
The sources mention using proxies, cultural centers.
Yeah, building influence often by supporting local Shia communities or opposition groups, like the Islamic Movement of Nigeria, IMN. But the smoking gun example was that Nigerian weapons seizure back in 2010.
Ah, yes, the shipment from Iran. What was in it?
It was a full arsenal intercepted in Lagos. Came from Bandar Abbas in Iran. Contained 107mm rockets, rifle rounds, mortars, grenades, explosives, clearly not for defensive purposes.
And intended for?
Onward distribution, the details weren't fully clear, maybe the Gambia or other regional actors. But crucially, the bust exposed IRGC Quads Force operatives on the ground in Nigeria, coordinating the logistics. It was a major diplomatic incident, proving Iran was using West Africa as a transit hub to arm groups far beyond its immediate neighborhood.
Okay, so that's Africa. What about EUCOM Europe? What's the ITN focus there?
In Europe, it seems to be more about espionage, logistical facilitation, and, disturbingly, planning terrorist activities, primarily against Israeli interests or Iranian dissidents.
How do they facilitate things in Europe?
They heavily leverage Shia diaspora communities, Iranian Lebanese across the continent. These communities, or elements within them, are used for illicit activities that fund the network globally. Money laundering, smuggling, various types of fraud. It's a financial engine.
And the terrorist threat.
The prime example is the 2012 Hezbollah bombing in Burgas, Bulgaria. They attacked a bus carrying Israeli tourists, killing 5 Israelis and the Bulgarian bus driver. A chilling reminder they can and will strike on European soil. And more recently, German authorities were reportedly hunting suspected Quds Force agents doing surveillance on Jewish and Israeli targets in Germany. The threat is ongoing.
And finally, the reach even extends across the Atlantic to Southcom, the Americas.
Yes. The ITN operates facilitation networks in both North and South America. Again, leveraging existing criminal infrastructure where possible.
The most famous or infamous example being?
That has to be the failed 2011 plot. It sounds like something out of a movie.
Yeah.
A Quds Force plot to assassinate the Saudi ambassador to the U.S., right, in Washington, D.C. And who were they allegedly trying to hire to carry out the hit?
A Mexican drug cartel, right. Lozada.
Exactly. Trying to contract one of the most violent Mexican cartels to conduct a state-sponsored assassination on U.S. soil. The plot was foiled by the DEA and FBI, but the sheer audacity.
It speaks volumes about their operational flexibility, their willingness to partner with purely criminal groups, not just ideological proxies, for high-stakes operations far from home.
Incredible operational flexibility, yes. And this global network, active from Nigeria to Bulgaria to Mexico, is ultimately backed up by Iran's own signature conventional asymmetric capabilities, things they build themselves.
Let's tick through those quickly. First, the boat swarms.
Right. This is classic IRGC Navy doctrine, especially in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. The idea is to use huge numbers of small, fast, relatively cheap attack craft, often armed with machine guns, rockets, or anti-ship missiles.
What's the goal?
To overwhelm a technologically superior Navy like the U.S. Navy through sheer numbers and speed, create a potent A2AD anti-access area denial threat in those confined waters. Estimates suggest they might have up to 1,500 of these small boats. Quantity has a quality all its own, is the thinking.
Second, their missile proliferation program. This seems foundational.
Absolutely. Iran has by far the largest and most diverse ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. And critically, they don't just keep them for
They
themselves.
share them.
Widely. Proliferated to Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen. This gives Iran strategic reach and influence far beyond its borders. The ranges on some of these missiles are huge, capable of hitting parts of southern Europe, Russia, maybe even China or Italy, according to some sources. It's a massive deterrent and power projection tool.
And third, the unmanned aircraft systems UAS program drones.
Iran has invested heavily in drones. They see them as a perfect asymmetric weapon. Cheap, expendable, deniable, yet capable of surveillance, attack, electronic warfare.
What kind of drones do they have?
A whole range, everything from small, hand-launched quadcopters for battlefield recon, up to larger, more sophisticated systems like the Shahed 129. That one's comparable to an early Predator drone, 24-hour endurance,
Yeah.
can carry guided missiles
And like the missiles, they export these too.
aggressively.
Yeah.
We've seen Iranian drone technology show up in conflicts across the region, from Yemen to Syria, and most notably now in Ukraine, used by Russia. It's become a major export success for their defense industry.
So pulling it all together, Iran's entire military and strategic approach seems built around this operational flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Proxies and illicit finance for deniable reach,
Uh-huh.
advanced cyber for low-cost, high-impact disruption and espionage,
Right.
and then these indigenous asymmetric weapons, boat swarms, missiles, drones to deter a direct conventional fight.
That's the synthesis, exactly. So after diving through all this material, what are the key takeaways for you, the listener?
Okay, for me, three big things stand out. First, Iran's strategy is just fundamentally hybrid and asymmetric. It relies massively on the IRGC Quds force and that global ITN for action that can be denied, happening across all domains simultaneously.
Agreed. Point two.
Their cyber power is real. It's sophisticated destructive attacks, election influence, massive IP theft. They can do it all. But they are also deeply vulnerable to cyber retaliation, as those ATM and power grid attacks showed. It's a double-edged sword for them.
Good point. And the third.
The maritime front. It's absolutely critical as their economic lifeline against sanctions. This makes the Shadow Fleet and its supporting infrastructure, like Fanava Group, a huge high-value target for cyber warfare, as Lab Duktigan proved. It's where economic survival and cyber risk directly collide.
Well said. And this convergence, kinetic, financial, digital threats all overlapping, it poses a really fundamental challenge, doesn't it? Especially for critical infrastructure everywhere.
Yeah, Iran is investing heavily in capabilities designed specifically to achieve major goals without triggering a big conventional war, operating in that gray zone. So as cyber keeps merging with physical conflict, think hacking CCTV for targeting or the digital siege of ships, it leads to a pretty stark question for everyone listening.
Which is, how prepared are you, really? How prepared is your local hospital, your power company, your bank, for a conflict that's being fought partly by hackers using MFA push bombing, partly by proxies thousands of miles away, targeting vulnerabilities you might not even know you have?
It demands a completely different level of awareness and defense.
It really does. Multi-layered security, constant vigilance, understanding the threat landscape.
And if your organization needs help navigating that complexity, especially understanding the mandatory security standards, the regulatory guidance needed to defend against exactly these kinds of advanced threats, credential theft, critical system protection, we strongly recommend checking out the expert resources compiled at www.compliancehub.wiki.
It's a great place to start getting those foundational controls right and to stay current on the actual breaches, the supply chain risks, the infrastructure compromises happening literally every day. Make www.breach.company a regular visit. You need that real-time intelligence.
Absolutely. Well, that was quite the deep dive. Thanks again to our listener for sharing these incredibly detailed sources.
Yeah, fascinating material. A lot to think about.